Looks like we're live. Hello everyone and welcome to yet another recreational programming session with Azuzin. How about that? How about that? So let's make a little bit of an announcement. Red Circle live on Twitch. And what are we doing today on Twitch at .television website? Today we are improving UI, UX of Visualizer, right? So, and I'm gonna provide the link where we're doing all that, twitch.tv/sodding, and I'm gonna ping everyone who's interested in being pinged, and there we go, the stream has officially started. So today we continue working on Visualizer, which is music visualizer that we started to work on some time ago. You can find the source code here. I'm going to copy paste it in the chat for people on Twitch, and for people on YouTube it's going to be in the description and stuff like that. And the goal of this project is to basically be able to create beautiful music visualization and render them into high quality videos. So then you can basically share them on the social media and show off how cool you are, right? So that's basically the goal of this entire thing. So let's take a look at it, right? So it's pretty straightforward so far. So Visualizer, I think I already built it from scratch, but I'm gonna rebuild it just in case. Right, so we're gonna run Visualizer. There we go, and this is how it looks like, right? So you're supposed to drag and drop some music in there. So let's grab some music. I'm gonna start the file manager so I can grab the actual music. So here is the folder, and maybe let's actually take a look at this kind of thing. So there we go. So this is how it looks like, right? So, and then you can press F and it will start rendering an actual video, high quality video of that visualization for that specific music. Right, so, and it's going to be, I think it's going to be full HD, and the bitrate is around 2000 KB or something, maybe 3000 KB. Right, it takes some time, right, because it needs to process all of these beats and stuff like that. Right, but eventually, somewhere in the current folder, so it's actually rendering in the current working folder. It's gonna create output.mp4, and that's gonna be literally the video of that specific visualization. Right, and the video is done. So right now it's finalizing, so it needs to to take some time to finalize and everything. And there we go. So here is the actual video, right, and that you can actually post somewhere, right? So, and you can do that for any music. So right now we only have one kind of visualization. In the future we're gonna have several of them, and also each visualization is probably going to have like different parameters that you can customize before rendering and everything. One of the cool features that we implemented recently is basically capturing the sound from a microphone, right? So you can't really visualize like a final video from a captured sound in a microphone, but you can just see how your sound, how your voice is going to look like when it's visualized. Right, so yeah, this thing reacts to my voice. So, and this is basically what I wanted to focus on today, honestly. This is because it's unclear how we're supposed to handle this microphone recording feature from the UX point of view. Right now, you're supposed to press M to switch to this mode, and that's basically everything you can do in that mode. Just see your voice visualized or anything that is picked up by the microphone. Right, but then you switch to the mode where you're supposed to drag and drop the music. So how do you integrate these two features together? Visualization of the music, right? So let me actually put some music in there. Visualization, rendering of the music, and also capturing mic. Right, I can switch from previewing the song to mic and back, but like it just looks weird. How am I supposed to integrate and tie everything together? It, like, you see what I'm talking about? It doesn't make any freaking sense. Like, so on top of that, in the future, we're gonna have a similar mode to microphone, but the one that picks up the sounds from the speakers, or from the system rather, right? So essentially I won't be able to allow the user to, for example, open YouTube, right, and just play something on YouTube, and this program is supposed to pick that up and visualize whatever you know is playing currently or something like that. So that's basically the idea, and it's kind of similar to how you know microphone picking up works. Yeah, people say compression is crazy. I'm really sorry about that. So essentially, I came up with the following idea. What if we allow people to work with several files simultaneously? So as of right now, you can only drag and drop a single file, and you sort of like focus on working with that specific file, and that is it. What if we allow the user to work with several files? So essentially, maybe we're going to have some sort of a panel at the bottom, which is the list of all of the drag and dropped files in there. And you should be able to basically click on them and switch between them, right? And depending on the current file, you can render that file and stuff like that. And then when you press M or some sort of a button, I believe it has to be some sort of a button, because each action should have like a visible UI button, so the users know what kind of features are available, so they don't have to guess, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So they enable the microphone mode. And in the microphone mode, they can see the visualization of their voice or whatever they're trying to record. There will be a record button. They press record. They record a little bit of them speaking and stuff like that. Then they say stop. And whatever they're recording becomes one of the files at the bottom here that you can then visualize and render and stuff like that. You see what I'm talking about? So there will be like a main screen. We can actually draw that, I think. So yeah, it's actually kind of cool, I think, personally. I think it is kind of cool, in my opinion, of course, but this is just my opinion. Just my opinion. So we're going to have a main screen. Main screen. And in the main screen, you have basically the preview, right? So something like this. So this is going to be preview. And here you're going to have a bunch of files that you drag and drop. Then you're going to have some sort of a button in here, which is the microphone, right? So something like a microphone. Usually how people denote microphone these days, it's usually some sort of like an ellipse, then something like this around it, and the leg of the microphone, right? So essentially you click on this button and you go to a completely different screen, right? Completely different screen, which is a recording screen, right? So which is a recording screen, which is completely separate from the main one. Right, so recording. So there's only preview in here, no other files or anything like that. You record whatever you want to record, and then the recorded sample goes back into the main screen, like so. Actually, this is what I wanted, like so. So, and there's two ways to add a new file in there, either by drag and dropping it, right? So you can drag and drop through the file system. So we can actually say, so this is basically the file system. So they're supposed to have a corner in here. You can drag and drop, or you can record. And then depending on what is selected, you can then render this entire thing. So yeah, because if you want to render something that you recorded, you probably want to first preview how it's gonna look like, right, one more time, and only then render. So, and this kind of like separation of these two screens and this special thing in here kind of ties together these two features, being able to drag and drop files and pick up things from the microphone. And if we're gonna pick up things from the speakers, it's gonna be a similar approach. It's just gonna be another screen where you just pick up from the speakers. Maybe it's gonna be literally the same screen, and in here you're gonna just have like a combo box or a list of the sources from which to capture things, and one of the sources is gonna be all of your microphones or the system sounds and stuff like that. It's basically the same thing, right? So, and I think this kind of approach actually ties everything together and works nicely, hopefully from the UI UX point of view. And that's exactly what I want to implement today. So it will require a little bit of refactoring of the logic, because right now the whole logic is basically designed around only having one single file. So that means we'll have to make it so we can work with several files first, at least, and then once we have this list of the files that we can work with, we should create some sort of like UI representation of that. So that's the goal for today's stream. That's the goal for today's stream. Introduce this sort of like a panel at the bottom, an ability to drag and drop several files, and maybe if we have enough time, maybe to tie together like recording and creating a new file in that. Right. So I have a feeling. So at some point we're gonna create our own like Ableton Live or something like that. I think I mispronounced it, but I'm not a music person, so I don't really know how to pronounce things. All right, let's go ahead and implement that. So I'm not going to close my paint. So I have sort of the UX sketch in front of me, right? So maybe I should actually feed that into ChatGPT and let ChatGPT implement that for me. I heard recently ChatGPT like acquired such ability, but I'm pretty sure it can only do web or something like that. Anyway, so let me see how we can approach all of that. So first of all, the first thing I want to do actually, I want to recompile Visualizer with a hot reloading support, so I can basically develop in sort of one session. To be fair, while I'm adding multi-file support, I don't think it's particularly necessary. Right, but I'm going to enable the hot reloading nonetheless, right? So what kind of configuration we're going to have? So I'm going to say that the target is going to be Linux, we're compiling for Linux, and with the hot reloading enabled, right? So let's actually go ahead and rebuild the entire thing. And there we go, we have hot reloading enabled, and hot reloading is actually rather useful in my opinion. So let's actually see what kind of stuff we can do in there. So let me put some music in here. Right, so, and while music is playing, right, so while music is playing, so I hope it's not too loud, I can just modify some things. For instance, I can go to here and find something like FFT render, and for instance in here, I can just do something like draw rectangle, and I can draw rectangle from 0 to 0 to WH, and the color we can say is going to be white, right? And I'm going to just recompile this entire thing, and there you go. So it's kind of interesting. So I can also change some of the colors in here, like specifically the colors of the bars and stuff like that. Though changing only like one color is not going to cut it, right? Because we actually render separate parts of the bar slightly separately. So I made only the stem black, right? So I need to do the same thing for the rest of the things. Right, I'm gonna put black in here, and I'm gonna put black in here as well. Right, so there we go. So that's actually pretty cool. As you can see, you can kind of modify this thing on the fly. Right, so, and if you're interested, like what is the music currently playing, I suggest to check out the song command, right? And for people on YouTube, the author of these songs are going to be in the description, of course. Gothic balls, right? So you're ready for a little bit of the encoding problems. I can make it full screen. It's probably going to look horrible, but without the encoding, it actually looks awesome, right? Right, without any encoding problems, it actually looks awesome. So maybe we can listen to something that's a little bit longer, because these are like a very small snippets, right? So let's actually listen to Pilot Red Sun. So it's a little bit calm. To be fair, it looks like some sort of like a boba tea, but it's supposed to be more beige rather than white, right? So we can keep it like this in here. So anyway, so this is basically why I enable hot reloading. It's very useful, especially if you work with, if you're working on UI, right? Because you want to sort of like tweak and modify on the fly without constantly restarting and checking things. And that's why people like web, right? Because you can just like modify CSS and it instantly applied or something like that. And everyone's, holy shit, that's why web is so good. Right, but it's like not an inherent thing for the web, right? You can do that pretty much anywhere. Right, so the music is a bit loud. Yeah, it is a bit loud. I really apologize for that. So I suppose I'm gonna close the application for now at least, right? Because the thing I want to do, I want to change how many files we can work with. So right now we can work with a single file, and we usually keep track of the music. Music, it's an object from Rayleap, and the file path to that specific file. So now we need to have a collection of these pairs, right? So we need to somehow maybe group them into some sort of a structure, right? Because we're probably going to have a dynamic array of these pairs. So we should call it something like a song, but it's not necessarily a song. It could be something like a sample, right? So let's actually call it a sample and put this thing in here. So this is the file path to the sample, and this is music. So if we're going to use the same sort of samples for microphone recordings, I think file path for them is going to be null. But maybe it's fine. Maybe that's going to be sort of the indication. Or maybe in the future we're going to have something like a sample kind, right? So sample kind, and that thing is going to be some sort of an enumeration sample kind. And this is going to be file, so SK file, or recording, right? Depending on where we got that thing from. Right, and if SK is file, so file path is going to be available, right? If it's a recording, file path is not going to be available. Maybe in the future we're going to have different sort of kinds of samples, right? But since we don't really have that right now, I don't plan to overcomplicate it too much. So let's just keep it file path and music. I think that's sufficient enough. So we also need to create a collection of the samples. So we need to have a dynamic array of them. So let's create a structure called samples, because we're going to have several of them. And let's create the items of the sample, and then the count and the capacity. So I'm just simply creating a dynamic array compatible with my di append macro that I use all the time. I think we can use the one from knob di append, right? So here it is. It's a very simple macro that basically looks for these three fields in a structure and just, you know, expands it appropriately. Simply expands it appropriately, right? So if, for instance, you don't have enough capacity to add another item in there, it's going to reallocate the memory, basically stretch the buffer. As you can see, it calls to reallocs. It will stretch the buffer and to accommodate the new items, and just grows indefinitely. Right, so it's a classical dynamic array, just a classical dynamic array, nothing special, nothing particularly special, right? So, and what I did, I essentially just replaced a single sort of pair, right? A single pair with a collection of pairs, right? And that broke a bunch of code, right? It broke a lot of code, in fact. So, and what we're gonna do, so this is how many places it broke. What we have to do, we have to go through all of these places where the compilation error occurred and fix them. And hopefully by the end of fixing all of that, we're gonna have multiple file support, at least on the level of logic, how, you know, modern developers like to say, on the level of business logic, right? But it's not going to be supported on the front end. It's only going to be supported on the back end. And once we refactor the back end, we'll also have to refactor the front end. I'm using correct terminology for modern developers, right? Because this is the terminology modern developers like to use, right? They think in terms of the back end and front end and stuff like that. So, yeah. So anything that doesn't fit into the paradigm of backend and frontend, people can't comprehend. Like, oh, what the fuck is that? Right? Anyways, let's continue our backend development. So what do we have in here? So here, oh yeah, so here's the function that is called right before reloading the plugin. So the way Hotreloading works, by the way, is that we took the entirety of the business logic, the entirety of the backend, and put it into a separate DLL that we load at the runtime. Right, it's only when the Hotreloading is enabled. When it's disabled, it's actually linked statically together. But when you do Hotreloading, all the logic is just detached from the application into a separate DLL. Right. And essentially, when you are about to reload, we tell the plugin, we tell that DLL, bruh, you are about to get reloaded. Do whatever you need to do before you fucking die. And that's this function is basically all about, right? So it communicates from the main application to the plugin, to the DLL. You're about to die, do your last thing, right? So, and usually it gives the opportunity for the plugin to return its state, right? So usually it stores its state in somewhere in dynamic memory, and that state is going to be passed to the next instance of the plugin after the reloading, so the next instance can carry the state of the application and move on. That's how basically it works. That's how basically it works. What we're doing here, in fact, is we take the stream processors and detach them from the current playing music. What the hell that means, right? So essentially, this is how API Hotreload works, right? So if you have a music and you want to observe the samples that are currently playing, you put a callback in there, right? You give a callback. So every time you want to play something, every time you want to send a chunk of samples to the audio device, first call my function so I can observe those samples and do something with them. For instance, visualize them or run FFT and stuff like that. So that's basically the idea. So the problem is this callback is located within the address space of the plugin. Right. And if you unload the plugin and load it again, this callback is not valid anymore. So one of the things we have to do before reloading the plugin, we have to detach that callback so it's never called. And after we're done reloading, we are attaching it back again. But we're going to be attaching a new one from a new plugin. So that's basically what's going on. The problem is, we don't have a music anymore. It's done. At least a single one. Now we have a collection of musics, the ones that we drag and dropped. Because you can drag and drop so that adds more files, so that means you have multiple musics. Never thought I'm gonna use the noun music as countable, but I mean, it makes sense to actually use it as countable in this particular context, right? So you can have several musics, and I suppose we just need to turn it into a loop, right? So another thing we're doing here, we check whether the music is ready, and in the Hotreload terminology, it means that it is loaded. So with the previous paradigm, the music may not be loaded because you have not drag and dropped anything yet. So it is a possibility. If we're going to transition from a single music to several musics, I think that doesn't make any sense anymore, because if you haven't loaded any music yet, your dynamic array of musics is empty. So, and if you have loaded something, that means all of the musics in that array are going to be loaded anyway. Otherwise, why the fuck are they in the array? I think that makes sense. So let's go ahead and maybe just like iterate through all of the samples, through all of the musics that we have, and just do this thing, right? So we are refactoring like a one operation into an array of operations. Is music loaded a better name then? Probably, but I didn't design the API, so it's a convention of the API, and I just follow the convention and don't ask any questions, right? So I'm already grateful enough for providing this library, right? So it works for me, and I can get used to any convention. So the thing about convention is that I don't like to discuss conventions for too long, because it's a waste of time. It's the time that you could have spent on solving actual problems. The only thing you personally need as a developer, as a professional developer for convention, is for that convention to be consistent. It doesn't fucking matter what it is. If it's consistent, it's good. Shut the fuck up and let's write the code, let's solve actual problems. That's why as a professional software developer, you must develop a skill of adapting to any convention, because you're going to be rotating between different projects. You're going to be come into project and come to a different project. They're going to have different conventions. And if you're going to waste time on arguing with people about not right convention, you're not going to go anywhere. If you go to a project and that establishes some sort of a convention, you study that convention, you shut the fuck up and you start working within that convention. That is it. That's my wisdom to you. You're welcome. All right. So let's go ahead and try to iterate the samples. So p samples count. So we're gonna do in here, we're gonna just detach. So I think I don't even have to check whether it's ready or not. And as you can see here, we return the pointer to the plugin, which is the entire state. And plug, right? So plug is a huge structure that stores the entire state of the application, right? And the reason we put all of that in the structure is because we're going to be passing it between instances of the plugin when we hot reloading and stuff like that. So that's very important. So in here we don't have a music anymore, so we have to do something like samples, items, and within the items I think we also have music. So this is a pretty long. Can we just do the Jai style or something? Basically it. Right. Yeah, we're gonna use a Jai style. There we go. So let's try to recompile this entire thing. These warnings are a little bit annoying, so I think I'm gonna go back to the original coloring and stuff like that. So let me remove the white thingy. So this is another one, and color. This is another one. There we go. So okay. So sample, it doesn't have a music incompatible type. Detach, oh, because you actually detach from a stream within the music. Yeah, I do remember that. So music contains a stream of some sort. Okay, plugin post reload. So this is basically called when we finished reloading the plugin. Right, so we unloaded the previous plugin, we loaded a new one, and we pass it the state of the previous plugin. So this is what we do. And what we have to do in here, we have to reattach all of the callbacks that we detached when we were unloading the previous plugin. So I suppose we can do the same thing in here. So essentially the same thing. But instead of detach, we need to do attach. Right, we just need to do attach. There we go. So what next do we have in here? Okay, so this is basically the code that is called when a new file just dropped. See? A new file just dropped. So one of the things we do when a new file is just dropped is we free the file path, right? Because essentially we get the file path that we dropped from here, and it is allocated in dynamic memory, and is going to be deallocated after we're done dealing with the dropped file somewhere here. So you cannot just use this thing by itself. You can't do that because it's going to disappear in here. And that's why you have to use Rust, because the borrow checker won't allow you to not do that. Yeah, sure. And so that's why we do strdup and stuff like that. So what I'm thinking is that maybe we should not free that stuff anymore. In fact, yeah, we shouldn't do that because we're going to have a collection of the samples, and so for each individual sample we allocate its own copy of the file path string, right? So that makes sense in my opinion. That makes sense. So we're not going to do free. So let's actually keep that copy around somewhere here, right? Because we're going to be appending all of that a little bit later, right? So we're going to do it like that. And this one is really interesting. So when we're dropping a new file, we're checking whether the current music is ready. So we have a notion of the current music. We stop the music and we unload it so we can load the next one. We definitely don't need to unload the music anymore because we have a collection of music. So we just keep appending those things, and we don't need to unload them. But we're definitely going to have some sort of way to delete whatever we drag and dropped, but not right now, right? So right now we just add support for just drag and dropping these things like indefinitely. So, and we definitely don't need to check whether it's loaded or not. The only thing we need to check, honestly, is, yeah, we need to have a notion of the currently playing music. That's what we need to have, right? So we have samples, we have several of them, but what is currently playing? What is currently playing? We have no idea. We need some sort of an index, right? Size current sample, which indicates which points at the current sample. So, which is an interesting thing. What if the current sample, what if the collection of samples is empty? How we're supposed to do that? So we're supposed to indicate that with -1. In that case, we can't use size t because it's unsigned. We have to use integer. But that means we have to initialize that somewhere with -1. It's not really convenient. Is there any better way to do that? Because like this entire thing is going to be initialized with a 0 initializer, so it's kind of meh, in my opinion. Kind of meh. You know what I'm talking about? What if we just make it a pointer to a sample? Right. That's a little bit better, I think. Right, so essentially, initially, when you 0 initialize the whole structure, it's going to be null, which indicates that it's not available. And then when you're going to be selecting different samples, we're going to set it to one of the samples within. This is freaking dangerous, mein Freund. This is freaking dangerous because samples is a dynamic array, so it's going to be shifting around, so you can't freaking do that. So you have to just suck it up, get your hyper, and use integer, right? So you have to use an index of set. So that means we will have to basically initialize this entire stuff, right? So we'll have to initialize. Let me see. So FFT, it's not really FFT, it's pre-reload. Yeah, pre-reload. Maybe even not pre-reload, it's like initialization, right? So we're going to do current sample, right? So current sample is going to be -1. So initially, when the plugin is loaded for the first time and initialized, we're going to just mark current sample with -1, and that basically indicates this entire thing. So let's go ahead and do stop music. Okay, so that means we only want to stop the music when the current sample is greater or equal than 0. So this is what we want to do. So current sample greater or equal than 0. For the sake of memory safety, we also probably want to check that it is less than the samples count. Right, because of that, I think I want to swap this entire stuff. I think I want to swap this entire thing like this. All right, and only then we will be able to do sample items, and we're going to take the current thing in here. Then music. That is a very anal way of accessing the current sample. All right. So because it's an extremely anal way of doing that, right? So because the index has to be within this range, and it can be missing, and what you get at the end is like this thing. I think we need to, maybe we can wrap it into a separate function. Okay, so what about current sample? Yeah, we're getting back to a pointer, but to be fair, like accessing this pointer like that is a little bit better because it's more stable. Again, if we just have a static pointer, it can get invalidated just by pushing into the samples array. So that's kind of a problem. So I think it's a little bit better. Right, so one of the things we can do in here is essentially just return the pointer to this thing, otherwise return null. Right, so we can just have something like that. And then, essentially, instead of doing this kind of thing, we can do sample, current sample, and if it is loaded, we simply unload it. Yeah, so that's probably the final solution that we want to have in here. All right, so that's probably the final solution. So let me see. Yes, yeah, that seems to be fine. Cool. Now, what we want to do, we want to try to load the current music. So we already have a file path. And this is going to be just a music. So maybe I'm going to create the sample that maybe later. All right. So if we manage to load the music, right? So we just say that the error. Oh, this one is interesting, Right now, if I can't load the file, I just display like a huge sign, can't load the file. But if we're gonna have multiple files, I think we have to rethink our way of reporting an error of not being able to load something. That has to be rethought really carefully. So let me try to maybe stash all of these things. Let me try to stash all of these things, and I'm gonna recompile this entire stuff. So this is gonna be Visualizer, and right now, if you try to load some bogus stuff, I think this is not bogus, this one. Yeah, it will just say it could not load file, right? This is basically what it will say. And you're supposed to like just try to load one more time. And if we're gonna have like you know, list of these things, we're gonna have a list of these things. Maybe when you drag and drop and you can't load it, we can just show some sort of a pop-up. Pretty pop-up with fade in, fade out, and something like that. You know, the Visual Studio Code style annoying pop-up in the right bottom corner, right? You know what I'm talking about, just like, hey, you need to update your plugin, something like that, but for errors, right? I'm a Microsoft product. Fuck you, install the plugin. This is basically how any Microsoft product feels like. So it's just like I can't use it. I literally just can't fucking use it. All right. So we can try to do something like that, but for errors. But errors are supposed to be annoying, right? So errors are supposed to be annoying, so that's fine. Okay, good. So because of that, I think we don't need this error flag anymore, because it's kind of like a part of the state now, right? It's kind of part of the state. Oh yeah, I basically forgot to restore this entire thing. So let me actually quickly restore. I'm gonna revert. We don't need the error, but I feel like removing error right now is gonna cause a lot of kind of problems. So let me see. So where do we set the error? We set it in here. No, it's not gonna really cause that much problem, right? So we only like set it in two places, and then we read it in one specific place when we're awaiting the person to drag and drop a file. So I think it's pretty safe to just get rid of this thing, and it's not gonna mess up the compiler-assisted refactoring too much, right? It's not gonna mess it up too much. So we'll actually continue with this kind of thing. So what is it talking about? So we have a comparison of the signed and unsigned. Okay, so we know that after this thing, after this condition, current sample is positive. So that means it is absolutely safe to cast it to unsigned one, and it's not gonna underflow because we checked for the underflow in here. So that's totally fine to just cast it like that. All right, so that's cool. So we don't really set error anymore. And here, this is where we have to show the pop-up somehow. Right, so error, load file pop-up. I'm gonna just put it like this. I'm not really sure how exactly I'm gonna implement that. So it's sort of gonna be like a stub, just a simple stub. And maybe I'm gonna implement that a little bit later. So we can do trace log. Right, so how do you use trace log? You're supposed to do log error, could not load file, and here we're gonna put to do implement annoying pop-up that indicates that we could not load the file. Right, so let's just continue with this entire thing. Okay, so after we load in the music, I usually like to set the music volume to half because music quite often is very loud. Then we're attaching the streaming processor to the music, right? So we do that and we start playing the music, but on top of that we have to append that music to the array in the plugin, so the array of samples, right? So maybe we'll have to create we probably can do something like this. I'm going to be using knob, by the way. I'm going to be using knob. And this is a very interesting example of what I was saying in the previous streams. We use knob for the build, but who said we can't use it for the main application as well? In fact, we can, right? So because it contains a lot of useful utilities that we can use in the main application, right? So that's precisely what we're going to do. So let me do samples, right? So this is going to be samples. And this is going to be collateral, and so we're going to do sample, and for the sample we're going to do music. So this is the music and file path. And by the way, with file path we have to be super careful. If loading the music has failed, we're not going to be appending the file path, so the file path is going to leak. So just to not leak any memory too much, I think we need to free file path in here. Yeah, I think we need to free it in here. So this is we have to be super careful in here. That's why you have to program in Rust, by the way, because in Rust you never have to think about this kind of stuff, right? So because the borrow checker is going to tell you, right, that you're trying to use something that outlives a specific lifetime. Oh. Oh, and by the way, this is interesting. So ArrayLeap allows you to drag and drop several files, which makes sense, right? Because usually you can select several files and drag and drop several files. So, and it just gives you the list. I was picking only one because we supported only one. But now we're going to support, because we're going to be supporting several of them. So who said we can't turn these into a loop? Right, and essentially iterate through all of them. Right, so essentially we know the count, so plus I, instead of this thing is going to be I. So we can just like keep repeating, keep handling all of them, and just like append all of them. So now we can afford to do that. We can just afford to do that. So yesu. So that's pretty cool. I like that. I like that. Okay. So let's try to compile it one more time. So const char, it doesn't, oh yeah, I forgot to open curly braces, of course, I forgot to open curly brace. So we don't have an obda append. We don't have an obda append. So we'll have to include basically knob. So including knob. But when I include knob like that, it includes only the definition, the declarations, right? So it acts like a header. So I need to put implementation somewhere. I can put implementations somewhere here, so I can just say knob implementations, and just this is the place where they can be located. But what if I'm going to be using knob in some other translation units? It would be nice to maybe put the implementations of knob in some sort of like a main place, maybe in the translation unit where we have the entry point. Like somewhere like down below that nobody can see or something like that, right? So, and when you link with this entire thing, though this one is interesting. So is it going to work? I didn't think it's going to work. Yeah, so it would be probably better to actually keep it within the plugin, just to be able to hot reload these kind of things, right? So let's actually define knob implementations. Yeah. So let's try to recompile this entire thing, and it cannot find knob. Unfortunately, cannot find knob because knob located within root of the file system. But we are searching in src, so we have two options. We can try to move knob h to here, and I'm not sure if it's a good idea, but I don't think it matters that much in the context of just implementing the feature. So I'm gonna just like move it in here, try to compile, and that requires to wrap this entire thing into parentheses as well. Yeah, there we go. So it complains about the file path, and this is because file path has a const quantifier, and the structure does not. All right, so I think, okay, so we're done with drag and dropping things. Okay, this is kind of cool. So we refactored drag and dropping. So now, since we're supporting several files, we actually iterating through several files, and we setting up and reloading everything correctly. We don't really say anything on error, right? So, but we're going to implement it a little bit later, right? We're going to implement it a little bit later. So far, so good, right? So that seems to be pretty good. That seems to be pretty good. All right, so what's gonna be the next thing? So music is loaded and ready. Oh, this one is very interesting, right? So the music is loaded, it is in fact ready, but we don't really have such notion anymore because we can have several files. It's whether you have some samples or you don't. If you have some samples, what's the current sample? And that sample is ready, so that should work. So what I'm thinking is that we need to do something like this. So sample, current sample, right? And if the current sample is available, so we can work with it. We can work with it. So let's go to the rest of the compilation errors. So here we are updating the stream. I suppose we're going to be updating the stream of the sample. So, and in here, if the music, yeah, so this is basically handling the space, like pause and pause. So pause and pause. And to handle that, we're gonna just do that through the current sample. Right, so this is the current sample. What else do we handle here? Q basically restarts the sample from the start, right? So I think we can just do that. So this is the sample. So F starts the rendering of the sample. This one is very interesting, actually. It starts the rendering of the sample. The first thing we do, we actually stop the sample if it is playing. It is very important. If you don't stop this sample, the stuff that is called in a callback is going to mess up some things. You really need to stop working with that sample. All right, so let's go to the next step. So you have to provide the file path and also this file path, and then you start the rendering. Right, so I think we don't really have to change too much in here. Load wave is pretty slow on big files. Yeah, this one is very interesting because I think this can be like a separate stream topic. Because I don't really know how to fix that without hacking Raylib itself. Right, it feels like making this specific thing faster will require changing something with the API of Raylib, and hacking the Raylib, it could be actually a pretty interesting topic, so I'll need to research that. All right. So let me see. Okay, so here we handle the errors. We don't have such notion of the error anymore. Right, so that means I can just simply get rid of this entire stuff. I can just simply get rid and put this thing in here. Right, so this is gonna be that, and there we go. Okay, so what do we have in here? This is a very interesting situation. Starting the FFmpeg process has failed for some reason, right? So this is for rendering. So we start FFmpeg, and if it didn't start, we probably want to tell something to user and cancel. So we are going to do what? We're going to do what? We started playing the music, but that means we'll have to take the current sample. We'll have to take the current sample. Okay, so let's actually give it a try. So sample, sample, current sample. But the question is, what if the sample not available? To be fair, you can't start rendering the sample. You can't start rendering the sample unless you have it in your array. So this situation should never happen, but the type system of C is incapable of checking that this situation has never happened. And what do you do when you have an invariant, a very important invariant that will never happen at runtime, but you can't check it at compile time? How do you do that? So you do assert. Yeah. So when you use assert and when you don't use assert is such a subtle topic that I'm not sure if I can explain it in 5 seconds. Do you guys know when you're supposed to use assert? Like, or let's put the question this way: when you personally use assert? You just feel it, people say in the chat. You just feel it. Right, so any other opinions? right? Do you use it for handling errors? Internal error. That's a good one, actually. That's a good one. Internal error. Yeah. Runtime invariant violations. So this is a good one because basically you use it only for the errors that caused by a bug in your application. Asserts should never be used for reporting a bug of the user or anything like that. In assert, you check in things that are literally bug in the program. For instance, sample being equal null at that particular point of time in the application is a bug somewhere up there. So that means somewhere up there, I didn't properly set up all the necessary variants, and that's my mistake, not the user's. If everything is correct up there, it should never be null in here. But what if I modify something up there and I completely forgot about this place? Well, in that case, I put assert in there. So, and as you can see, it's a very subtle matter. It's really difficult to explain. Right, and I have plans to maybe make like an entire video talking about this kind of stuff and just like at least structuring my thoughts. Right, because I have a hard time explaining to younger developers like what the fuck is assert. And certainly I had problems understanding why the fuck you need assert when I was younger and less experienced developer. Right, so if you see that for the first time, it's just like, what the fuck is assert? Why do you need that? Like, what's the point? It's such a weird concept. Right. And some people said in the chat, you kind of learn to feel when to use it. There is not like very specific rule, like a very hard rule that you can follow when to use or not to use assert. You learn to feel it, right? So if you've seen a couple of examples on like how to use assert, you start to understand, sort of internalize, oh, that actually makes sense. So yeah, assert is the secret sauce to good cooking. Yeah, it kind of is. So, oh yeah, so some people say, does no assert mean that sample must be null? Yeah, so we have to say not null. Yeah, there we go. So, for example, we do not expect sample to be null in here, but we do expect ffmpeg to be null in here, and ffmpeg being null actually carries very specific meaning, and that meaning we couldn't start ffmpeg. Right, but sample equal null in here carries only one meaning. We fucked up somewhere, right? We as the developers of the application, not the user, not the operating system, not anything outside. We as the developers fucked up. Fucked up, straight up fucked up. Also unreachable regions, yeah, so also a very good example. Some regions are like pretty much unreachable. Okay, so if we are rendering, we always have a sample. Otherwise, we should not be able from the UI to reach that specific place. Maybe we will in the future, and that's why we have assert in here. Okay, so here we should start playing music again, right? So this is going to be playing music again. And this is another place. Oh, okay. So there is two places that duplicate the code, right? So they're literally like similar. Yeah, there's two places that copy paste the code. So in those places, basically, to cancel ffmpeg, right? So the first one is when ffmpeg failed. So we have to do all of this cancellation of ffmpeg, and the second place where we do this cancellation, and when it's succeeded but finished. Right, so it succeeded but finished. So this is a sample, and yeah, so it's pretty much the same. Huh? That is it? That is sus. Wait, is that it? It's that simple. So I was actually expecting to continue compiler assisted refactoring for a little bit longer, but it was rather fast. Okay, so do I compile with the debug information? I'm pretty sure I do in fact compile with the debug information. So let me take a look at the file. Do we have debug info? It is, yeah, we do have debug info. So just in case, let's start this entire thing inside of a debugger, right? Because I have a feeling that it's gonna suck fault, right? Because we've been slapping this code very sloppily, so I'm pretty sure something's gonna break, and it would be nice to just like instantly see what is going on. It seems to be working. Seems to be working. Did it crash? It feels like, I think it crashed. Oh, did it? I don't know. Doesn't do shit. Interesting. So, and it didn't even, what's interesting is that it didn't even stop. So it didn't crash. It just like didn't handle the thing. It didn't handle the thing. We can try to press some buttons and maybe break on pressing those buttons and see what is going on in there. For example, I don't even know. Let's break right here. There we go. So, and we're breaking a specific frame, so we can take a look at the current plugin. And that's really, yeah, there we go. So we have these things. And we have 3 samples in here. Look at that. So we have 3 samples. And we even know their names. They're just like simply not played. And I think I know why. I literally think I know why. What debugger is this? This is GDB. But I'm using a specific front end for GDB, right? So on the front end is called GF. It's created by Next. Do you know Next? Next is actually a very cool hacker that is widely known in a very narrow circles. So I also really recommend to check out their other works, right? So they actually created like their own operating system. They also work on different like music plugins and stuff like that. So there's a lot of their work in GitLab as well. So they're really cool software developers. Just like it's insane what kind of thing they do. And GF is only one of their works. It's only one of them. So I really recommend that person. Oh, they're also part of the handmade community. Okay, that makes sense actually, because the handmade community is goated. All right. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. So yeah, after basically appending this entire thing, I think I failed to start playing the music, or did I? So that's a very interesting question. I actually start playing the music. It's just it doesn't update properly, right? Because yeah, I'm playing the music, so that makes a lot of sense. So what is going on in here? Why is it not playing? Why is it not playing? Because that makes sense. So we then unload this entire thing. I think I know what is going on. I forgot to set the current sample, right? So, and I should set the current sample to samples count -1. There we go. So basically to the last one that you appended in there. That's why it never, yeah, that's why it never updated anything, right? Because it thinks that there's nothing in there. Okay, so that makes sense. Okay, let me restart the entire thing. Let's recompile. So, and restart one more time. One more time. So yeah, we didn't break anything. Look at that, it still works. And we can load more things. So I'm just like looking whether it doesn't screw up the thing, the data in the F15 visualizer, because if several samples will start playing together, they're gonna actually mishmash the visualization, so it's gonna look horrible. So everything seems to be fine as of right now, so I think that is totally fine. So we can take a look at the state of the samples. How many of the samples do we even have in there? I have an idea. We can try to maybe display the amount of samples somehow. Right, I'm gonna just put this thing in here. So I hope the encoding isn't too bad, right? So because there is a problem like when streaming this entire stuff, because the visualization makes encoding like unbearable. So at the end, when we are visualizing, right? So the music is loaded in plain, right? So it is loaded in plain. We can just do draw text, text XC. I would like to maybe, I think I want to have like a C tags thingy. So we can do probably the following thing. What if I find all of the files with the name that consists of C and H? Can I do something like that? So all of the C and H files. I think I can find all of them. Yeah, so, and there's not that many of them. So, and essentially I can just feed all of them into E tags, which is C tags, but for Emacs. Right, and it creates like tags for all of these things in here. So that's kind of convenient. I kind of, yeah, sometimes I find these kind of things useful. So that will allow me to just jump to the definition. There we go. So. Is that poggers? I think that's pretty poggers. Who needs IDEs? Who needs IDEs? So the font. We already have loaded font in the plugin. So for the text, we're going to be using text format. Right, so there's a pretty cool thing, text format in here, which there's actually several definitions in here. Right, which is basically printf, like as printf, but you don't have to worry about memory allocations or anything like that because it has 4 internal buffers. Right, it has 4 internal buffers, so you can just call this thing and it's not gonna leak any memory or anything like that. Right, so for simple things it's actually perfect. Right, samples loaded, and we can do ZU, and this is gonna be samples count. So this is how many samples we have loaded, and we can put this as the text. I can't see Scheiße in this mist. So the other things we have a position, so we can set the position to maybe literal 0, so this is a 0. The size of the font is going to be 69, there's going to be no setting, spacing, and the color is going to be white. So let's put it like that. Right, and that should start rendering the text. Oh, this is not what I wanted, but that's fine. That's totally fine. Alright, so samples loaded 7. Is that cool? I didn't even restart the application, it's just, it keeps running, right? So I can just like do this kind of shit. And I can load more things. So now there's 8 of them. So I can keep loading them. Hot reloading. Hot reloading. Alright, so let's actually go back to Pilot Resun. So we already have 10 samples loaded. So, and the question is, how are we going to be displaying this entire stuff? How are we going to be displaying this entire stuff? We'll need to basically allocate a little bit of a space at the bottom, right? We need to allocate a little bit of space at the bottom. Right, but I think I'm going to do that right after a small break, because I need to make a cup of tea and stuff like that. So yeah, and after the break we're gonna start working on the actual UI, because we updated the database schema on the backend. That's right. So this is what we did. We updated the schema of the database, and now we're ready for refactoring of the front end. And we're not gonna be just doing regular front end. We're gonna be doing the you know, the design, right? We're gonna be working with styles and stuff like that. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Holy fucking shit. Alright, let's make some break and alright, so I'm back, and let's continue, shall we? Let's continue. We probably need to restart the application, right? Because I stopped the application while I was on a break. So let's restart it, and let's load some samples in here, right? So let's load them back. Let's make sure that they're not too loud, because I want this thing play while I'm modifying it. I think it's very useful to have something like that. So plug.c, and how are we going to be approaching this entire stuff? So I need to find a place where we previewing this entire thing. Alright, so yeah, we're rendering the visualization with FFT render, but when we are rendering it, we are actually passing the width and height of the screen within which we're rendering this entire stuff. So to be able to do some sort of like some form of layouting, I need to be able to offset this thing. I need to be able to offset this thing, not only set its size. So it's going to be very interesting. So maybe FFT render should accept rectangle instead of width and height. I think that would make sense. And here width and height we converted to float anyway, so it would make sense to actually keep it as a rectangle anyway. Tags has changed. Why do you ask me? So can I just close it? Yeah, there we go. So rectangle, and let's say this is going to be boundary, right? So this is the boundary. This is how many samples we have, and this is the boundary within which we have to render this entire thing. Right, so let's try to recompile this entire stuff and see how it goes. So obviously it's going to fail, but we're going to go through the compilation errors and just like fix it like that. So this was width. What's the next one? Boundary height. So this is going to be boundary height. So, and yeah, so that would be actually super convenient. So that means we only have to define the rectangle, and FFT render is supposed to feed all of this rendering into that specific rectangle, and that way we can put that preview in anywhere on the screen and organize the UI around that idea, right? So it's actually a very like straightforward and old idea that I used in some previous projects as well, right, for UI. We're probably going to do a variant of immediate UI. So that's basically the idea. All right, so let's go ahead and just substitute all of these things with appropriate substitutions. Words are hard. Words are actually hard. So this is going to be boundary height, and yeah. Sometimes you just have to go through compilation errors and fix them one by one. Maybe there is a temptation to use some sort of auto-completion system or refactoring system or something like that. But to be fair, I personally kind of like to go through compilation errors manually and fix them manually, because it sort of puts me into this mental mode where I not only fix errors, I also logically go through sort of like a checklist of different things within the project and make sure that I understand everything correctly, right? It's not about like doing repetitive mindless work. It's also, you know, making sure that you understand things, right? So, and you don't encounter something that you didn't expect. If that makes any sense. I'm not sure if I can explain that, but that's kind of why I feel like I like to go through these errors manually and fix these things manually. I'm not saying that you shouldn't use some sort of like automation for that. Like you can use whatever you want. I'm just explaining like how I work. This is just my workflow. Right, so everyone can use whatever they want, right? So it all boils down to what you as a software developer can put on the screen, right? If you can put something fucking awesome on the screen, nobody gives a shit how exactly you do that, right? Did you write it yourself in assembly, like character by character, or in the binary, in machine code, or did you ask ChatGPT? Nobody gives a shit at the end of the day. It's all about what you can put on the screen. Can you impress people? Right? I don't know. So just like sharing my workflow. Is this thing cool? Maybe. Not really. Right. I'm pretty sure Demus Sinners can come up with even more awesome shit. I'm not really experienced in visualization of the thing, so I wouldn't say it's that impressive, but I'm trying. I'm trying to make something cool. Alright. So let's actually turn this into a rectangle. So maybe this is going to be collateral rectangle. So, and obviously initially all of these things are gonna have offset of 0, 0, right? So this is just an offset of 0, 0. So here do we have, right, so, oh yeah, so this is rendering while, yeah, we have 3 places where we do FFT render. When we display the music, when we visualize the music, when we visualize the recording from the microphone, or whatever we capture from the microphone, and when we render into the video, right? So there's at least 3 places where we do FFT render, right? So 1, 2, 3. Right? In all of these places we have to update the API usage. So this is a rectangle. So this is 0, 0. We don't really have any offsets for now. So, and this is the rendering, so the same thing goes here. So this is 0, 0. There we go. Seems to be working, seems to be twerking. Okay, so I would probably want to test how this entire thing works. Let me find the usage for visualization. So this is a capturing and this is just a regular visualization. So maybe we could just create a boundary of some sort. So rectangle boundary. I'm gonna simply reassign this thing in here. Right, so this is gonna be the boundary. And let's just keep it like this. So this is boundary. So we can just use, I think we already have, yeah, we have W and H. We can just keep them like this. We can try something interesting. We can try to maybe make it smaller. What if I divide the height in two? Right, what if I divide the height in two? How it's gonna look like? So this one is very interesting. And it worked actually. Right, so this is the usual rectangle, right, but it's just cut in half. I can try to cut in half the width of the boundary. Right, so yeah, that's pretty cool. And I can try to move this thing around. Right, we can try to move this thing around. And this is where it probably will break. Right, if I just do 100 in here. Right, if I just do 100 in here. Yeah, so because we don't take the offset of the boundary into account, we only take the size, so that's why only size kind of works in here, right? So only size kind of works. So what if I actually divide this entire thing by 3, but multiply by 2, so it's 2/3. Right, what if it's 2/3, so it's a little bit bigger. So we need to update the FFT render so it takes into account the offset. So let me see how we can do that. So displaying the bars. So this is where the bar starts. The bar is only the stem on which these sort of like sparks sit. So I suppose we have to offset this entire thing by boundary x, y, like so. Right. And yeah, this is kind of funny. This is only the start. Right, so the end is actually still not affected by the offset. So what we have to do, we have to kind of do the same thing. I think I can even copy paste this entire thing. Yeah, I think I can copy paste it. There we go. So yeah, as you can see, now the bars are kind of affected, but not really. I think this has to be, so 200 is actually too much. Let me find 200. What if we make it like 50? Right. So yeah, there we go. So that makes a little bit more sense, I think. But anyway, so we have to do that for all of them. So all of them have to take into account the offset. So these are smears. Okay, so let's offset the smears. Let's offset the smears. Okay, so as you can see, smears are already on the stems. They are on the stems, and now the last thing we need to do, we need to offset the circles as well. So we're going to be actually putting them like this. Yeah, boundary x and y. So let me recompile this entire thing, and there we go. So now this entire thing actually respects the offset. So I think it was like this. So I can make it even something like 100, but this one is going to be 50. There we go. So as you can see, I can like move the whole thing now. I can move the whole thing now. So, and I can go back to just, the full screen. So this is going to be just the full screen. And there we go. So that's pretty cool. I really like that. So that means we should be able to basically allocate a little bit of the space at the bottom, so let's actually maybe introduce some sort of a constant, something like a panel height. So and the panel height is going to be fraction of the whole height. So it's going to be fraction of the whole height. So we take the whole height, and let's actually take the 10th of that thing. So we're going to take the 10th of that thing. So and essentially we just subtract the panel height from the height of the boundary. So this is more of a like a preview boundary. Let's call it preview boundary. Right, so this is a preview boundary. And there we go. So this is 10th. Is it good? I'm not pretty sure. So it's actually pretty small. What about 20%? 20% I think is fine. Right, so we can have the list of files in here, maybe even 25, but 25 is like a quarter of this entire stuff. Is quarter okay? Yeah, something like this. So we can keep this entire thing in here. So after that, we probably want to have another rectangle, panel boundary. So we're gonna call it panel boundary. And the panel boundary is going to start at essentially preview boundary. Let's say that x is going to be 0, right? So, but y is going to be at the height of the preview boundary. So, preview boundary height, this one. So, width is going to be the whole width, right? So, this is the whole width. And the height is the panel height, right? So, we already know the panel height. So let's actually try to render a rectangle in a place of the panel boundary just to see if it, fills it correctly, right? So let's do draw a rectangle, and this is going to be rect, and this is panel boundary, and let's actually make it red so it stands out. So it stands out, and there we go. So this is basically where the panel is going to be. So yeah, we filled it up, and we resize the thing, and it actually updates accordingly. So everything is fine, right? So like that. So now what we have to do, I think I'm gonna represent the files as squares for now, as some sort of squares. So let's actually do the following thing. So let's have something like a item boundary, item boundary, and item boundary is gonna start at the panel boundary x. So basically at the same position as the panel boundary, right? It starts at the same position. So roughly somewhere here, right? So roughly somewhere here. And in terms of width and height, so it's gonna be square. So that means it's going to have the same width as the panel height and the same height as the panel height. So it's gonna be sort of like a squarish thing. So, and let's draw that item boundary, right? So this is going to be item boundary. So something doesn't work, I forgot a semicolon. All right, there we go. So here is the single square. And it would be nice to maybe have some sort of like a padding around this entire stuff, right? So maybe we can introduce something like a panel padding, and the panel padding is going to be fraction of the panel height, right? So let's actually make it like tenths of that specific padding. And essentially how do we achieve that? We offset the panel padding, the position by the panel padding, and we probably subtract panel padding but twice of that, right, to create an actual sort of offset. Right, so panel padding. So that's pretty cool. So is it gonna work? Yeah, there we go. So now we have a padding, and we can actually control that. Since it's a fraction of this thing, we can make it half of the height. So it's going to be a very small thing now. You can't even see that. It's too much. Right, so yeah, so we can make it like this. But it's too small. I think 0.01, like a tenth of the height of the panel, was actually fine. And it's very important to actually express those values relatively. So this thing automatically resizes and layouts itself and stuff like that. And I'm not using any freaking framework, any UI framework, just think about it. The only thing I have is draw rectangle. I'm just drawing rectangles in imperative language. It's like adaptive UI and shit, like no CSS, nor anything, like I'm just drawing rectangles. Maybe I don't understand something, right, but it feels to me as simple as CSS. Actually, it feels simpler than CSS. All right, so, and essentially what we want to do, we actually want to have several like items. We want to have an item per sample that we already loaded. So let's actually load a bunch of other samples, right? So maybe, so, you know, fly away. Yeah, so we're gonna have 2 samples, as you can see. So this is 2 samples. And Yusu. So let's actually start doing a loop, right? Let's iterate through all the samples for size t. So p samples count plus I. Can you see Scheisse in this mist? I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure if I can see Scheisse in this mist. Alright, so here is the thing. If I just do it like that, it's not gonna do anything. Right, because they're drawing in the same place. So we need to offset them on each iteration. So that means we have to do something like I multiplied by panel height, right? So because their width is actually height. Yeah, I think that's a good way to do that. And it didn't work because I'm a dummy dum-dum, I suppose. So doesn't reload. So what if I try to put pilot resun one more time? No, it doesn't reload that. Sample counts. Samples count. What is it? So yeah, I forgot. Yeah, it's better not to offset by Y. Thank you so much, chat. I think I'm. Oh, I switched to microphone. Right. So I think I'm getting a little bit tired. There we go. So we have 3 of them. So these are 3 samples. This one is interesting. So yeah, that's basically it. So we have the panel, right? So, all right. So one of the things we probably want to do, we want to be able to click on these samples, and essentially select, right? Select one of the files. So let's go ahead and do that. It's gonna be kind of interesting. So we can, if I'm not mistaken, do something like get mouse position, right? So this gets the mouse position. Okay. So, and as far as I know, you can check collision. Yeah, you can check collision point rectangle. So essentially, you're checking a collision between the mouse position and the item boundary. And that's how you can know if you at least hover over the item, right? So we can even use that to color it differently, right? So essentially, if you hover over this entire thing, we're gonna basically render it as red. If not, we're gonna render it as white. So that's basically the whole thing, right? As you can see, we can highlight this entire stuff. We don't really handle the click, but who said we can't do that? So yeah, we'll also need some sort of a scrolling at some point. That would be interesting to implement. Yeah, it's actually pretty cool. Okay, so let me see. So we need to detect the click. When we hover over this entire thing, right? So we need to check, is mouse button released, right? So you usually detect the click on released, and specifically we're going to do mouse button left, right? So we're going to do that on the left button. So, and essentially what we need to do, we need to set the current sample to I, because we're handling the clicks and rendering as we iterate. So we do that simultaneously. So yeah, we need to check the following thing. If the current sample that we're currently rendering is equal to the current sample, right? So that means there's no need to switch anything, right? So you effectively clicked on a sample that is currently playing, so you don't really have to do anything. It's only when they're not equal, I think that makes sense. So when they're not equal, I suppose what we have to do with the current sample, we have to stop the current music. Right, we have to stop the current music. But we can only stop the current music because, for instance, if the current sample is negative, you shouldn't stop the music. Right, you shouldn't stop the music because nothing is selected, so we also have to check for that. So essentially we need to have a sample and we do current sample because we need to perform these range checks and stuff like that. So stop music string, and it's going to be sample music. And it only makes sense if the sample is available, right? Again, just because this thing is not equal to the current sample doesn't mean the current sample exists. We still need to check for its existence, right? So after that, what we have to do, we have to take p samples items I, and this is the music, and we have to start playing that music. Play music stream, right? We start playing that music stream, and we set the current sample finally to I. So that's how we're going to be switching between different samples effectively. All right. So something went wrong. So here, this is unsigned. This is unsigned. I think it makes sense to actually do this thing, right? We know that I is like at least greater than 0, so it's pretty safe to just cast it to integer in this specific case. All right, so yep, let's reload and so we can now switch between different samples. That's too easy, like what the fuck. Yeah, maybe we can do something that we display the currently selected sample or something like that. For instance, if, yeah, specifically we can have this kind of situation. Right, we can have this kind of situation. If this thing not equal, we do all of that collision and stuff like that. We can basically move that thing outside, and that way we don't really have to do this check anymore. Right, we don't have to do this check anymore. If they are equal, we can render them with a different color. So I'm just using the colors randomly. I'm not trying to make it super pretty. Right, I just want to have something. Right, so now we can see the current sample. Right, so that's pretty cool. So, yep, and it would be interesting to see if we can render different samples. I want to pick some very small samples, something small, something like this maybe. Right, and let's just try to render it. Let's just try to render it. It will take some time, right? Because it's a relatively slow process because we're rendering like a full HD video and everything. So the UI when? Well, it's already here. So the UI right now. I mean, it's not difficult, right? So I don't know where people got this idea that to do UI you absolutely need some sort of a UI library, right? Well, to be fair, I also was thinking like that, but in reality, it's just shapes. You just put shapes on the screen, and that's it. And it's actually way simpler than you may think, and you have way more control. The problem with CSS, at least for me, is how little control I have over how I put the shapes. Right. Not only I have like much less control, I have to also learn these arbitrary rules somebody came up with several decades ago for whatever reason. And it's just like, bruh, just give me an imperative language and I can do everything myself. And I was just like, is OpenGL an outdated tech? I'm using OpenGL right now, so I don't know what you're talking about. So, does it look outdated to you? So this is the outdated tech the memes on Reddit told you not to learn because it's outdated. So I don't know. Is it outdated? It's up for you to decide. Alright, so let's see if it actually rendered the correct video. It did in fact render a correct video. So it's pretty cool. So yeah, so essentially now we sort of like extended workflow of the application, right? So now you work not with a single file, but you work with several files. Use drag and drop between them, right? And yeah, you just pick a one, and then you render that specific file. So then, if you want to record something, you press M. Oh, this is actually very cool. So because in the record mode, we are. I'm really bothered by this thing. I don't know what's up with that. I don't remember seeing that. But anyway, so in the record mode, you don't have this preview. So at least you have like a visual distinction between just the preview mode and record mode, right? And then you're going to be recording in here, and then you switch back, and the recording is going to be one of your files in here, right? And then you will be able to select it, maybe listen it back, just to make sure, just to see what exactly you're about to visualize, and then you can visualize in that. So yes. It would be kind of interesting to actually do some sort of a scrolling, right? Some sort of a scrolling, but that means I need to be able to cut off, you know, the rendering. Is there something like scissors in Raylib? I'm pretty sure there was something like scissors. So because this is something that there exists in OpenGL, and it's quite often used in UIs. At least I saw Jonathan Blow use scissors for UI things, right? So basically when you have an area, a scrollable area, some sort of a scrollable area, and you just like cut it off. And that way scrolling is essentially just an offset within you render the whole thing, right? It's just going to be an offset within which you render the whole thing. So let me actually go to Raylib. So this is going to be Raylib. Src raylib.h Caesar. Okay, all right. Begin Caesar mode. Define area. Okay. You just define the area. We can just try to do that. I never tried that, so I'm really curious how it's going to work. So we are. So we have a panel padding, panel boundary, and essentially, man, that makes it so much easier to actually implement. So let's go ahead and do that. So, but we have to explicitly say these things. So panel boundary. So this is a panel boundary X, panel boundary Y, panel boundary Y, panel boundary width. Boundary width and panel boundary height. So at the end of this entire thing we end Caesar mode. Yeah. So maybe on top of that, what we want to do, we want to do something like this. Right, so to indicate the nestiness of these sort of modes and stuff like that. So, but I don't think it's going to be visible much, right? It's going to be visible much because it's already kind of cut off anyway. So one of the things we can try to do, we can actually cut by half of the width just to see how it works. Right, does it actually cut? Yeah, it actually cut. So, yeah, it actually cut. That's very interesting. So we can also make it maybe 2/3, right? So make it a little bit bigger. You can't see Scheisse yet again, unfortunately. Maybe I could do something like this. So you could see all of that stuff. So can you see it now? So we should be able. So we can do 2/3, right? So multiply by 2 and divide by 3. And yeah, so we have a little bit bigger. Though it's still, yeah, this is funny. It still catches that, but this is because we don't use that part for the. So that's fine. That's actually fine. Right. So that's pretty cool. So I'm not really sure if it's that necessary, if this thing is gonna take up the whole width anyway. So just because it takes up the whole thing anyway, it kind of automatically cuts itself, so that's totally fine. So maybe we don't even need the scissor mode. Maybe it's kind of redundant, but I'm gonna keep it anyway. Okay, so what we want to do, so we need to have some sort of an offset, according to which we're going to be actually rendering this entire stuff. And that offset is going to be applied to the whole boundary. Yeah, this one is interesting because we're going to be using scissors for one style of boundaries, and then we're going to be detecting clicks with a different offset boundaries. So yeah, scissors are not really helping in here, right? So they're not introducing anything because it's cut off automatically anyway, and we need to keep track of offset and not offset things. So I think I'm gonna just get rid of them, but I'm gonna keep them in at the back of my head because they seem to be very useful. This kind of stuff, like being able to limit the area within which you want to render things, is extremely useful. I'm telling you, it is extremely useful. So, but for now, it's not particularly needed. It is not particularly needed. So another thing we want to be able to do, we want to be able to basically scroll, right? So let's call it panel scroll, and we can use this scroll as basically an offset within, you know, within X, right? Essentially within X. But effectively, what we have to do in here, we just have to use this. So this is a panel scroll. Right, so we're gonna refresh it, and it didn't really change because it's not particularly scrolled. So we can try to make it like negative. We can scroll it by the size of the single item, right? So this is gonna be minus height, it's the size of the single item, but let's actually do half of it, so we can see that we have like half of this thing. So it's gonna be to the left, right? Offset is negative, so it's going to be something like this. And as you can see, it's actually scrolled. It's actually scrolled. Right, so and then we can make it, I don't know, so multiply this entire thing by 2, right? So maybe even 3, something like that. So we can see different stages of scrolling, and detecting this stuff still works, right? So it is relatively easy to just offset and scroll this entire thing. Right. The only thing we need to do now is actually bind updating that scroll value to the wheel. So, but it never really worked with the wheels in Raylib, so we'll have to actually see how we do that. So, and on top of that, this panel scroll, I think it has to be static because it has to survive between the calls, right? So it has to survive between the calls, and yeah, so it's gonna be static. So yeah, let's keep it like this. Right, so by making the local variable static, you are effectively making it global. Right, for those who doesn't know how static variables works and stuff like that, if you have a local variable, you mark it as static, it becomes global, but its name visible only within the current function. It's like a hidden global variables, which means that whatever modifications you do to this local variable are going to be visible between the calls to the function. It's in a data segment. Yeah, I think so. Right, I think it puts it in a data segment. So it's very useful for these kind of situations when you have very small state, which is very local to a particular UI element. So you just want to keep it like that, right? So you don't want to like create a separate structure for each individual panel and stuff like that. You just like allocate a little bit of memory that is from the language perspective visible only here, and it kind of works. So for this case, I think it's perfect. For this case, I think it's perfect. So let's actually see if we can work with wheels, right? Can we work with wheels? I'm pretty sure we can. Okay, so get mouse wheel move. So what do we have in here? So get mouse wheel movement for X or Y, whichever is larger. Ooh, this one is interesting. Can I just plug the... Okay, wait a second. Don't freaking tell me that. I can just do something like panel scroll plus mouse wheel. Don't fucking tell me that it's gonna be as simple as that. I wonder. So it's gonna be unbound, of course, but yeah, it is as simple. Okay. We probably have to modify it by like maybe, let's say a panel, yeah, panel height I think is gonna be enough for this specific case. And yeah, so yeah, now I basically scroll by one item. Oh, this is so cool because it's basically from the... Yo, it's probably like 1 or -1, so that means I can specify by how much item I can do. So I can multiply by 10, and this is basically scrolling by 10th of an item. Yeah. What the fuck? I'm not using a specialized UI library or anything like that. I'm using a library that allows me to just handle input from the user and put rectangles on the screen. Let that sink in. Let that sink in. And I'm not showing off. By the way, I'm saying all of that not to show off. Look how great of a developer I am. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that that demonstrates that people quite often overcomplicate things. That's what I'm trying to demonstrate. Like, I'm not trying to show off. I already know that I'm the God coder, and so do you. We both know that I am God coder. I'm doing that not because of that. Right, I'm just showing. I'm a very humble God coder. Right, so... that's actually cool, isn't it? That's actually so cool. I really like that. So, of course, it's unbounded and shit, but yeah. You can make it smoother, by the way. You can make it smoother. Essentially, we can introduce some sort of a velocity, and yeah, update the scroll by that specific velocity, and we can even do that right now. Who said we can't do scheisse? We can do scheisse. So essentially, we have a panel scroll, panel velocity, which is initially 0, and basically we do panel velocity by this entire thing, and we update the scroll by the velocity. We update the scroll by the velocity and multiply by dt because it's a delta time. But interestingly enough, velocity, on top of being updated by the mouse bump, right? It also slows down over time, right? It's supposed to slow down over time, and we can do something like this, right? So that's velocity. And let's see. Doesn't work because it didn't compile. Where is DT? Don't I have DT? I don't have DT. Disgusting. Disgusting. Get frame time. Okay, so let's actually bring DT and shit. You can see. Ah, shit. Look. So we have smooth scrolling. Why the fuck is it so easy? I hate it. I hate how easy it is. Let's actually make it a little bit faster. Yo. Okay, so what about 4 of these items? Yeah. Can your CSS do that? I don't fucking think so, mate. So it would be better if I could like drag around this entire thing, but maybe, yeah, maybe this. What the fuck? Why is this so easy? Good luck doing that in CSS. It would take me over a month. Well, yeah. So I do actually. The more I program in a very simplistic style in C, the more I believe that you don't need anything but a Turing-complete imperative language and ability to place shapes on a screen in absolute terms. I don't think people who write CSS want to write mouse interactions. Well, sounds like their problem, not mine. Again, I respect their decision not to do something that would actually put something cool on the screen. Because somewhere in the middle of the screen I said, it doesn't matter what you do. At the end of the day, what matters is, can you put some cool shit on the screen or don't? I can, and I'm not afraid to do something that actually puts cool shit on the screen. If they don't want to do something that puts cool shit on the screen, it's better for me. It's better for me. So I wish them good luck. If they don't want to do that, sure, I respect their decision. I respect their decision. Sure, buddy. Oh, why did I stop this piece of shit? So now I have to start over. Now I have to start over. Okay. Oh, that's actually pretty cool. Oh yeah, when you have 0 samples, this is a separate screen that doesn't have the panel. So the panel only gonna appear when you put. Yeah, that just worked accidentally, purely accidentally. So I need to limit this entire... Man, like, I need to implement dragging. I definitely need to implement dragging because that would feel much more better, I think. But I mean, will right now is also fine. Right. So what do we have? Like, let me actually put a pilot red sun. Already. I'm already streaming for 2 hours. God damn, bruv. God damn. So, yeah, I basically already implemented everything I wanted to implement for the session. I laid out the foundation for the new interface, right? So we have this panel, right? You can switch between them. So the only thing I would like to do now is to make it look better, right? Limit the scrolling so you don't go to infinity, because right now you can scroll to infinity, right? We don't want to be able to scroll to infinity. It would be nice to just like lock it in here or something like that. So, and then the next step is going to be basically recording your voice, right? Recording some sort of a voice into a new sample and putting that sample back into this panel, right? So it would be also kind of nice to be able to delete the samples, right? Maybe like a right click and some sort of menu appears. And I think it has to be right click because I could have implemented just sort of like a cross in here and automatically delete it. But having cross like that is actually dangerous because you can delete things accidentally by 1 click. So such operations, such destructive operations like deletion should require at least 2 clicks. So because of that, it would be kind of nice to have it in a context menu, right? But that will require like additional work and stuff like that. Yes. All right, so I guess that's it for today. Thanks everyone who's watching right now. I really appreciate that. Have a good one, and I see you all on the next recreational programming session with Mr. Zozin. Isn't that poggers? I think that's pretty freaking poggers. Thank you so much for watching. I love you all. Mwah.